Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Week 14 Highlight Haven NFL Recap Show. I'm your host, Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by Josh Wolver of Josh's Sports Report to break down each and every game that took place during Week 14 of the NFL season. Josh, it's great to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me on, Matt. Let's get into this recap.
Yeah, and as always, we will be taking callers throughout the stream, so feel free to call in using the link in the chat. With that being said, we have a lot of games to break down, so let's jump right into it, starting with Browns at Steelers. Steelers picked up a double-digit victory here, 27-14. Josh, I'll let you get it started.
Yeah, the big thing is that the interceptions continue to play Jameis Winston. They go down there and their hopes of coming back are diminished yet again. Jameis Winston, two pretty bad interceptions, but he did kind of make up for it with two touchdowns. And now at this point, we're seeing Kevin Stefanski and that Browns coaching staff. The Nick Chubb running game hasn't worked as much as we thought it would, and they begin to make changes. He only picks up 11 carries in this game, and they throw the ball a majority of the time. Jameis Winston actually ends up attempting 41 passes in this game, which is pretty high. And it's clear that, there's that terrible injury to Nick Chubb last year. And Jerome Ford has not been playing better either. So serious problems in Cleveland's run game. And then also in the turnover department, they lose a fumble, they throw two interceptions, and then they commit 9 penalties for 81 yards. So those three factors right there are not going to win you a divisional football game. And now on the other side of things, this is not a Russell Wilson breakout game, I suppose, as we saw last week. Only 158 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he let his playmakers make plays. Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, Van Jefferson all find the end zone in this one. Overall, Pittsburgh improves to 10-3 on the season. Again, they lead that NFC North. Cleveland had it. They were in it for a majority of this game. It was 7-3 after the first quarter, but then Pittsburgh began to run away with it in that second and third quarters where they went on a 24-0 run, and at that point, it was too late for Cleveland to come back.
Yeah, and I mean, Jerry Jeudy, obviously Cleveland lost in this game, but Jerry Jeudy has been an absolute beast. 5 receptions for 64 receiving yards and a touchdown. He's averaged 113 receiving yards in his past 6 games. That is really insane for Jerry Jeudy, obviously. And then Russell Wilson, 15 of 26, 158 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Wilson is 6-1 as the Steelers starter. In his 7 games, he's thrown 12 touchdowns compared to just 3 interceptions. And you kind of touched on this, but Cleveland was extremely sloppy. I know you said this exact stat, and I'm just going to repeat it just to kind of emphasize it. 9 penalties for 81 yards is going to make a massive difference throughout the course of the game, obviously. And then 2 picks, and they went 2 of 13 on third down. Pittsburgh is now 2 games ahead of Baltimore with just 4 weeks left to go, and they've won 7 of their last 8 games.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
I'd say that right now I was a little skeptical of them, I'd say, to start the season, but right now I know that they are an actual contending team. They've looked incredible. They've beaten teams that actually prove that they can beat good competition. Now, I will say, the last 4 games on their schedule might be the toughest 4-game stretch of any team. They play the Eagles, the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the Bengals. Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, Bengals.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised. Maybe they win 2 of those games, but it's going to be tough either way. So the division is not even close to, being decided at this point. Who do you think has the division, if you had to make a prediction?
Oh, well, I think easily it's in the Steelers' hands, right? This is their division to lose. Matt, you said they're 2 games up. You got to realize what that means. What that means from a Baltimore perspective is that 2 weeks you need to win and the Steelers to lose. So that's very hard when you don't control your own destiny and basically how your chance at winning the division, even if you play really good football, your chance at winning the division relies on Pittsburgh losing 2 out of their final 4. And the way they've been playing, it just feels like that they're kind of too good of a football team to go down here. And you're right. They do have probably the toughest finish to their schedule with that set of 4. And they go back to back on the road against the Eagles and the Ravens, and then they host the Chiefs. Those 3 weeks, I'm not sure what the Bengals will look like, who's sitting, who's starting, whether or not the division's wrapped up. Those 3 weeks will be a testament to whether or not this Pittsburgh team is legit. Remember I think it was 2020, 2021 when Pittsburgh started off the year, 10-0, 12-0, and then they just crumbled
13
down
and
the
0, I think.
stretch. 13
Yeah.
and 0, you're right. And then they crumbled down the stretch. It's time to see if Russell Wilson can legitimately play playoff type football in these next 3 weeks. He'll prove it.
Now, I don't think that the Ravens are that far off whatsoever, because you said 2 weeks where they have to win, Steelers have to lose. Well, obviously the Steelers play the Eagles next week, so we can say that's most likely a loss for them. The Ravens play the Giants. That's an easy win, and now it's within 1 game.
Okay.
And then the next game is the Steelers versus Ravens. So if the Ravens win that game, they're tied up. So I think it's a lot closer than people might think.
Eagles Steelers is an easy win. We just saw the Eagles. I mean, again, the Panthers stick in there with the Eagles and again play good football and force their hand. But we'll get to that for now.
Yeah.
Let's move over to the team that the Ravens do play next week. That's the Giants, who took an 11-14 loss at home in a slop fest in the Meadowlands. Matt, this game was decided by a Brian Boris blocked field goal. The Giants attempted to tie things up after they only scored 3 points in the first 3 quarters. That's right. They scored a field goal in the first 3 quarters. They came out, got a touchdown, 2-point conversion there and that made it an 11-14 game. And then they were a field goal away and it got blocked. In this game, it was kind of a slop fest all over the place. We both talked about on the Tailgate Show how big of games Alvin Kamara, we expected 44 yards on 17 carries. He was not good. The lone Saints rushing touchdown was to his backup, Kendre Miller. And then in the passing game, Jawan Johnson, Matt, I've heard the story all the time about some distant relationship with Jawan Johnson that we don't need to get into here. But somehow he Ubered his way into the end zone. No pun intended. Derek Carr picks up a touchdown and an interception, and he played not a bad game. I mean, at this stage, it doesn't take much to beat the Giants, just because, I mean, they're struggling, right? Everywhere you look, up and down this roster, I guess Malik Neighbors was probably the one bright spot in this game. 5 receptions for 79 yards. Drew Lock didn't play horribly. He had 1 interception, but no touchdowns. The bottom line is the Giants offensively, they just can't score.
I mean, yeah, this was just a slop fest game. Drew Lock, if anyone thought he was going to be better than Daniel Jones when he took over, they're wrong. It doesn't change anything. He's probably worse than Daniel Jones, to be honest. 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Derek Carr looked solid out there, I guess, while he was playing. Not a great game, and then obviously he suffered that left hand injury. Jake Haener took over for him. It might have been announced at this point. I don't know the severity of the injury, so I'll have to check that one. But yeah, you talked about the blocked kick that would have been a game-tying field goal. I mean, that kind of just sums up the entire Giants season right there. The sloppiest game that you'll ever watch finished with the field goal that got blocked. I mean, it's just a terrible.
And they committed 12 penalties for 112 yards, so that adds sloppiness to the mess.
Yeah, I mean, the Giants have lost 8 straight games, and this wasn't a great win for the Saints by any means, but Darren Rizzi is now 3-1 as their interim head coach. I don't think there's still good odds of him staying as their head coach next season, but he's definitely making a case for himself, is what I'll say. So, solid win there, I guess, for the Saints. You know what? A win is a win, and then that's how they have to look at it. A win is a win, and they got the win even if it wasn't pretty. Now, moving over to the next game, Jets at Dolphins. Yeah, that's a rough game for you guys. Dolphins 32, Jets 26. Anders Carlson hit a 42-yard field goal with under a minute remaining that sent the game into overtime, and Jonnu Smith in overtime caught the game-winning touchdown. The Jets have given up a game-winning drive in 3 straight weeks. Obviously, this week against the Dolphins, last week against the Seahawks, and then the week before that against the Colts. It's been some ugly outcomes for them recently. New York has had 4 consecutive losses. Aaron Rodgers, he had kind of a mind-blowing stat in this game. He passed for 339 yards, which is the first time he's passed for 300 yards in 35 games, which is over 2
Since
seasons.
2021.
Yeah, since 2021, that's insane for a obviously first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. I mean, that just shows you kind of the not decline, but he's struggled a lot more recently than in his prime. That gets into when should he retire, what his future looks like for the Jets, but obviously we're not getting into that right now. But that stat is definitely really interesting for a player of Rodgers' caliber. Garrett Wilson, I was talking bad about him during the tailgate show. 7 receptions, 114 receiving yards. He looked great out there. And then Devontae Adams, I know you predicted a big game from him. 9 receptions, 109 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Miami, despite the win, just went 1 of 9 on third down. And the Jets had 10 penalties for 83 yards. Penalties are everything in football. I mean, you look at the outcome of the game, well over 50% of the time, the loser is going to have more penalties for more yards. It's that simple. Tua looked really good out there, 331 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. And Tyreek had probably his best game of the season, 10 receptions, 115 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown. Tyreek scored just 1 touchdown in his first 8 games. Since then, he scored 4 touchdowns in his past 5 games. Devon Achane has 8 touchdowns in his last 7 games. Miami barely squeaks out the win and keeps their playoff hopes alive.
Yeah, they do keep their playoff hopes alive. While slim, they improved to 6-7. And Matt, honestly, from my point of view, I could telegraph this game from a mile away. What I saw a lot of the Dolphins' offense was a lot of quick throws over the middle. Get the wide receivers out in space. Let them use their speed. Let them make plays against a banged up Jet defense without their main contributor in Sauce Gardner, who was sidelined in this game after getting injured against Seattle. So, and then Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. See, this is the best game we've seen from this duo all year. The combined for over 200 yards and a touchdown. I really liked what I saw out of them. How they schemed to get open. Garrett Wilson with a sweet double move on Jalen Ramsey for a deep ball that went for over 40 yards. Matt, I do want to correct something you said earlier. You said Anders Carlson hit the field goal to send it to overtime. Anders Carlson did hit a field goal with 52 seconds left. That put the Jets up 3, but then the Dolphins drove down the field into Jason Sanders' field goal range, and then he tied it up to send it to overtime.
Yeah.
With 7 seconds left. So it was actually Miami doing the damage. And that's sort of what I want to talk about with this Jets defense. They let up a 57-yard field goal before the half as Miami took the lead there entering the break. Then up 3 with 52 seconds of defense to play. They let up another 52-yard field goal, and that sends us to overtime. And then they absolutely break in overtime. They show no resilience. Miami marches right down the field with a couple screen plays, and Jonnu Smith gets the score to finish them off. See, the thing is with the Jets team is that the one game that Aaron Rodgers is going to pass for 340 yards and go 27 of 39 and a touchdown, and he doesn't turn the ball over, can't be the game where your defense is going to fold in the clutch situations. And it's really just unfortunate timing there. And then in the running game, honestly, it doesn't look great on the averages, but I do like what I saw out of the rookie running back duo of Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. In the absence of Breece Hall, they fill in and do a good job combining for over 83 yards. They took some of that pressure off the passing game, and they had some good bursts. And honestly, I saw a lot more of them in the receiving game. Braylon Allen, 4 receptions for 38 yards, was the 3rd highest on the team. So I like how they were incorporated all around. And then Jamien Sherwood, stepping up on defense for the injured CJ Mosley, finishes this game with 13 tackles, 5 assists, and 8 solos. Dude was all over the place in this game. I love how he played with heart for the Jets. And then it's just an unfortunate loss. You've lost 7 out of 8 to Miami. Make that 8 out of 9 with this loss. And it's frustrating. I think this Jets team, everybody who watched this game will probably say this Jets team played a better football game. They punt once the entire game. I just really like what I saw out of this team. It's just the inability to finish. Excuse me, they punted twice in this game. I said they punted once. They punt twice in this game. It's the inability to finish close games. This is their 7th loss of the season where they had a chance to win the game in the final 2 minutes. 7, Matt. And you can't be a good football team without that. I think neither team was good here on 3rd downs. The Jets managed the way. Both teams were perfect on 4th downs. I did like how the Jets did roll the dice a couple of times on 4th down. But I talked about the defensive line getting to Tua and disrupting him in the in the tailgate show how it would be key if he just got to sit back there and deliver and wait for his routes to develop. The Jets defense would struggle all day. And that's what happened. They don't get home not once in this game. They did not sack the quarterback once. The tackles for loss were minimal. So it was just the Jets defense, again, the front four, a lack of penetration. And then on the other side, Rodgers goes down 3 times and they lose the penalty yardage and the penalty game. So overall, it's a messy season for the Jets. I do like the way they played against a decent Miami team. I guess a pretty good game from Tua. What I really saw out of him was he was just getting the ball out quick, not necessarily, his best game, but that's what Miami does. They like to have the high completion percentage from Tua, who goes 33 of 47. Matt, I've been talking for a really long time. Let's move on here.
Yeah, I mean, real quick before we move on, I think the story for the Jets has just been how they're able to close out games. Because we've seen them hop off to early leads. This one, they were up 23-15, I believe it was, going into the fourth quarter. They got off to a 21-7 lead against the Seahawks last week, and they managed to blow them. I mean, they can get off to a hot start. At the start of the season, they couldn't even get off to a hot start. Now they're managing to get off to some hot starts, and they just can't maintain them. I think that's been the biggest. Yeah, that's been the biggest problem.
First half offense was great for them. They scored every single drive they had, and then in that second half, that complementary football goes away. The defense can't force stops. The offense goes 3 and out multiple drives in a row. So yeah, that's just how football works. It's all about how you play in the fourth quarter, and the Dolphins just played better in the fourth quarter and overtime. By the way, I could go on a completely separate rant, but both teams deserve to touch the ball in overtime, even if the first team scores.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question about that, but we can get into that a different episode because I know we could talk about that for a while longer. Definitely, I'd agree with you though. I think both teams should definitely touch the ball in overtime, especially if you're going to make that a rule in the playoffs. But moving over to the next game, Jaguars at Titans. This might have been the worst game I've ever witnessed in my life.
I didn't watch a second of it.
I realized that when I was doing my prep. I could say this was the worst game I witnessed. It's the worst game I've looked at the stats of. It's the worst game I've heard of. But no, I didn't watch a second of this game, mainly because I was watching Red Zone, and I don't know if there was a single Red Zone play on here. But yeah, it was an atrocious game. Mac Jones, 23 of 31, 220 passing yards, 2 interceptions. I told you during the tailgate show he's going to do the Jameis Winston thing. He's going to start off He played well last game when he got his first opportunity. Then we get to see a little bit of what Mac Jones is actually like as a starter. Brian Thomas Jr. was really quiet for basically the entire game. Ended, though, with 8 receptions for 86 receiving yards. Will Levis, 168 passing yards. Tony Pollard continues to play really well, though, for Tennessee. He's kind of their one bright spot right now. 21 carries, 102 rushing yards. That's his 6th game this season with over 100 scrimmage yards. This was Jacksonville's first victory since October 20th. Just a terrible game overall. Josh, what were your main takeaways if you had any?
Well, actually, I want to correct a statement I made earlier. I said I didn't watch any of this. That's wrong. When the Jets were at halftime, I flipped over to Red Zone, and they were the only game out of the break. That was just because the first half, literally, there was no whistles. All they did was just punt all the time. Yeah. So they were the first game out of break. So that's actually the only part of this game. I watched the other third quarter until the Jet game came back on. But yeah, 10-6. I feel for you if you were a Tennessee fan, especially if you attended that game, especially if you drove any more than a half hour to get there. You tossed up 6 points. And heading into the fourth quarter, it was a 3-0 game. Mac Jones did nothing all day. Then they go out and they score. They get a Cam Little field goal, and Tank Bigsby finishes off with the game's only touchdown. Matt, did I not tell you that Tony Pollard would be a dog? He is. 102 yards on 21 carries. Absolute workhorse. And honestly, if I was game planning for Tennessee, that would be our game plan. It would be Tony Pollard right now because he's been awesome. That's just the simplest way to put it. I don't know where this Titans offense would be without him. They seem to not be able to move the ball in the receiving game. You saw bright spots last week from Will Levis against the Commanders. He made some nice throws. I just wasn't seeing it then, and I maybe he made a couple nice throws, and we talked a lot about his raw potential. Yeah, this is what happens with an undeveloped quarterback. No matter what kind of arm strength you have, no matter what happens if you can't read a defense and you can't have vision, you will throw for 168 yards and complete almost, little more than half your passes. So there was nothing going on in pretty much either receiving game. Mac Jones throws another terrible interception. He finishes with 2 on the day, threw it right to Awuzie. If you don't know what was happening, he was getting flushed out of the pocket right before getting sacked. And I mean, I don't know. Just take the sack, Mac Jones. Just tossed it right up to blue jerseys. And Tennessee loses 10-6. So awful. Both teams are now 3-10. And you got to think, right? I don't think the way that the way that the NFL is right now, and we're seeing, I guess, besides maybe, I mean, I think pretty much everyone in the AFC, we're seeing like that clear division leader. And right now in the AFC South, I mean, I guess in both Souths, I just feel like there's a team at the top that put anywhere else would not be very competitive. And right now that's the Houston Texans, who I'm pretty down on right now, haven't been playing great football. And if you're wondering, they do end up with a bye this week, so we don't get to see how they play. But I mean, 2, 3, and 10 teams in your division feels crazy. Let's go to a game that had a lot more scoring that maybe can excite some people some more. Minnesota scores 42 in the return of Kirk Cousins, who doesn't do terrible, but he does throw the 2 interceptions. He gets a lot of yardage. Matt, I'll let you start us off with the 11-2 Vikings and the 6-7 Falcons.
Here's the thing. Yardage doesn't really matter when you're down by 21, because at that point you're passing the ball practically every single play. And they weren't down by that much to enter the half. They were actually entered the
14-10.
fourth quarter. They entered the fourth quarter at 21-21. And then Minnesota went on a 21-0 run in the fourth quarter. And here's the thing. I would say that Michael Penix should have played in this game, especially considering that Kirk Cousins threw 2 interceptions. But it seems unrealistic. Because I said if Minnesota jumps out to a very early lead, they should play Michael Penix. They didn't, though. It was a competitive game up until the fourth quarter. And at that point, you're trying to mount a comeback in the fourth quarter. So putting Penix in the game wouldn't really make that much sense unless you're down by 21, say in the third quarter, and you want to give him some play. But no, it kind of happened all of a sudden, so I guess it makes sense that they didn't play Penix in this one. But I think Kirk Cousins should be benched next game, without a doubt. He was 23 of 37. As you mentioned, 344 passing yards, not bad. 2 interceptions. Cousins in his past 4 games has not thrown 1 touchdown. 4 straight games without a touchdown. In those 4 games, he's thrown 8 interceptions. He's thrown 8 interceptions before throwing a single touchdown. That's outrageous. Bijan Robinson, basically the workhorse for Atlanta. He got 92 rushing yards and a touchdown in this one. Darnell Mooney got 6 receptions, 142 receiving yards. Mooney has 6 games this season with at least 86 receiving yards. And then Ray McCloud got 8 receptions for 98 receiving yards. That's his second straight game with at least 90 receiving yards. Sam Darnold, I unfortunately played him in fantasy, so I would know this best, but he had an amazing game. 22 of 28, 347 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I think it was he's just out there proving a point. Hey, Kirk Cousins, the Vikings moved on from you, and I'm better than you. I mean, I've done everything that you've done better. I've gotten Jordan Addison more involved. I've made Justin Jefferson perform just as good as he was with Kirk Cousins. I mean, Sam Darnold is looked like a better version of Kirk Cousins so far this season, based on what Kirk Cousins did in Minnesota and the fact that the Vikings are now 11-2. Yeah, 11-2. Aaron Jones has gotten pretty involved in their offense as well. 73 rushing yards and a touchdown. Jordan Addison, I mentioned this, 8 receptions, 133 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson had 7 receptions, 132 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. Atlanta got called for 12 penalties, combining for 127 yards. And Atlanta has lost 4 straight games, while Minnesota has 6 consecutive wins.
Matt, I want to go to your point about starting Michael Penix next week. I feel like if there was any time to do it, this season at least, and while you're at least still competitive, I get that you fall to 6-7, but with any chance that you're competitive, I'm looking into what Atlanta's got coming up. They've got the Raiders and the Giants. So those are 2 very winnable games. I guess maybe you want to start Michael Penix on, easy sailing. Don't exactly toss him out there and have him play the Bills, but, maybe just a gradual start to get in there and play the Raiders and the Giants if that is something that Atlanta would like to do going forward. So that'll be very interesting because you're right. Kirk Cousins has been turnover prone recently. He hasn't been able to do good things with the offense. Bijan Robinson, probably a better day than we expected. Almost 100 yards and a touchdown. Darnell Mooney, absolute huge game. 142 yards on 6 receptions. And then you mentioned how good Ray McCloud was, but their counterparts, Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson. I tell you all about Jordan Addison on my fantasy team right around the 50-point mark this week. Absolute tear, 133 yards. PPR league gives you 8 receptions and 3 touchdowns. Monster day. Aaron Jones continues to do good things in purple uniforms. And they pick up a 21-point fourth quarter to springboard themselves out to a 42-21 win. Again, 42 points for the Minnesota offense. I mean, besides that wild game in LA, this is the most a team scored this week. So I think I think Minnesota continues to do some good things. I talked a little bit about them being sort of fraudulent 10-2 team, but they show that their offense can certainly do big things, and their defense has also been up to the task this season. So at 11-2, Matt, there's some serious threats coming out of the NFC right now, and Minnesota seems to be emerging as one of them. Obviously, they've probably got a couple teams ahead of them in the pecking order when you think about the Eagles and the Lions, but boy, the Vikings are certainly making a case for themselves as they pick up a big win at home to get to the 11-win mark. And I just talked about one of those teams atop them on the pecking order. That is the red hot, or should I say green hot, Philadelphia Eagles. It's a 22-16 win over they're not so bad anymore, Carolina Panthers. Yeah, they continue to roll. They continue to progress. Another pretty good day for them when they stick in there against a bad team. I mentioned this was a game that I predicted, at least on the pregame show, that this was the game that Carolina finally shows their weakness and gets steamrolled by Philadelphia. But that's not what happened. The Panthers really did a good job sticking in there. At the end, they forced Philadelphia to get a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. Carolina actually had the lead heading into the fourth quarter after a Chuba Hubbard run. So Philly ends up winning 22-16, but that's only because a fourth quarter touchdown and 2-point conversion. So Panthers played good football. Adam Thielen, 102 yards in the receiving department. Chuba Hubbard, 92 yards and a touchdown. And then Bryce Young, he does throw the 1 interception. But overall, again, another good day from him. They only punt twice and only allow 1 sack, which is big. On the other hand, Carolina's defense does some good work. I talked about them not being as good, but they get home for 4 sacks and they punt and they force 4 Philadelphia punts. The Eagles also take 7 penalties for 40 yards. Jalen Hurts, again, has not been the quarterback we've seen out of him. He only attempts 21 passes and completes 14, 108 yards, but 2 touchdowns. But, Matt, who else? It's Saquon freaking Barkley. 124 yards on 20 carries. Jalen Hurts also gets in on the tush push for 3 total touchdowns on the day. Really not a big day passing for Philadelphia, but nonetheless, they get the job done, and they match the Vikings and also improve to 11-2.
I mean, you mentioned Jalen Hurts having 14 completions. I don't think that's anything to be worried about because Hurts is 20th in completions throughout all quarterbacks in the NFL. He only has 222 completions this season, which sounds like a good amount, but it's honestly not that much. And he had, I believe, 11 completions just maybe a few weeks earlier. So he doesn't necessarily get the most completions. I know he kind of relies on a system. I don't know if he's 1,000,000% a system quarterback, but he relies on a specific system, and I think he plays within that system. And part of that system is play heavy on the run game. That's obviously what they did in this one with the Saquon Barkley performance that you mentioned. He is the most single season rushing yards of any Eagles player. And you mentioned also Carolina entered the fourth quarter up 16-14. Philly didn't have the greatest offensive showing, but they still managed to, increase to a 9-game win streak. A part you didn't talk about is the Jonathan Brooks injury. He went down, I think maybe fourth quarter. I think it was fourth quarter, and
Yes.
it was ruled about 3 hours ago as a ACL tear in the same leg that he tore his ACL last season. He's obviously going to be out for the rest of this season, probably some of next season, if I had to guess, considering that it's happening pretty late in the season. Doubt he can get back by week 1. We'll have to see there. Obviously, I feel extremely bad for him. He's dealt with so many injuries, but luckily Chuba Hubbard has played really good without him and kind of led the Panthers offense as a whole. Eagles didn't have a great week, but I think the fact that they got this win, okay, you get the win. Now your bad week is behind you, and you can continue to play how you were earlier in the season. And I think Bryce Young's kind of securing his starting spot next season. This is maybe 3 or 4 consecutive weeks where the Panthers have looked like a good football team. And you could draft someone, you could go back to you could sign someone, Andy Dalton, or keep using him or something. It just doesn't seem worth it to me. I think Bryce Young, when he starts showing some hope, there's no reason to go away from that right now. I think you got to keep using him, see what he can emerge as. But overall, another win for the Eagles, 9th straight wins. They've been on a tear.
Yeah, Matt. And going back to that Bryce Young thing, for me, it's a no brainer. The reason they
Yeah.
pick him with the number one draft pick out of Alabama is because of his potential, is because of what they can do with him. Do you think they seriously drafted him with hopes of being playoff contenders in that first year when
No.
they won 2 games? Absolutely not. They were hoping for him to grow into a star in the NFL. And hey, it takes guys coming out of college 3, sometimes 4 years to do that. I mean, we've seen guys like Bo Nix develop pretty quickly. That's just because of I mean, he just played so well at
Yeah.
Oregon. They didn't really need much time. But that's kind of one of those like exceptions to the rule. Usually it is going to take a quarterback multiple years to develop. So, yes, it looked like Bryce Young was, a huge bust, especially the way CJ Stroud played in both of their rookie campaigns. But now Bryce Young is butting into that quarterback. Carolina seems to have their future, I would say, right now in Bryce Young. Let's go to a team that does not have their future quarterback. That is the Las Vegas Raiders. Aiden O'Connell finishes the day with 11 completions, 104 yards, and an interception. They fall to 2-11 after losing 13-28 to the Buccaneers. Tampa Bay jumped out to a very early lead. 2 quick touchdowns to the first quarter. Las Vegas battled back, but that's about all they had, as the Buccaneers have two touchdown quarters. That's the first and the fourth. They start hot and they end hot. Baker Mayfield, the turnovers continue to be a problem. He throws 2 in this game, including 1 in the red zone. But 295 yards and 3 touchdowns doesn't seem like that big of a problem until you realize that it certainly can be down the stretch. And even with Atlanta's loss, they are still only 1 game back.
Mhm.
Desmond Ritter was also in this game for Las Vegas. He threw for 101 yards, so they both did not play well at all. And for Tampa Bay, we talked about Bucky Irving having a huge game. He rushes 4 times for 3 yards. So, yeah, that just goes to show you that your predictions aren't always perfect. As he barely gets any touches, and Rashad White really leads the Bucks. 17 carries for 90 yards. Not as huge of a day for Mike Evans as some would expect. 4 receptions for 69 yards, but they play the Raiders, so it doesn't take much. They toss up 28 and win at home.
Yeah, I know you mentioned Aiden O'Connell had 11 completions. He did also get injured in the third quarter and went out with an injury. Desmond Ritter took over. He got actually carted off with a knee injury, so not a great sight there. But I guess Desmond Ritter's not bad for a third string. You don't want him as a starter. Obviously, we saw it with Atlanta last year. But if you need him as a third string, it's not the end of the world for them, although I don't think it matters. At this point, they could sign me as their third string quarterback, and it probably wouldn't make a difference. But Brock Bowers had kind of an underwhelming game. 3 receptions, 49 receiving yards. Not an underwhelming game for a rookie tight end. Tight ends have been just bad in general this year, but compared to how well he's been playing, it's definitely not as good as you would expect for someone like him. Rashad White got another rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown in this game. And then Jalen McMillan had a 2 touchdown game as well. Cade Otton and Mike Evans combined for 139 receiving yards. And the Bucks have won 3 straight, now advancing to 7-6. They're just a couple of wins away from clinching the division. Again, Las Vegas falls to 2-11. But if you look at the Bucks' schedule, they have a really easy ending, as I mentioned. Yeah, they play the Chargers. They're going to have to duke that one out. That's going to be a tough one. And that's maybe, I don't, depending on who Atlanta plays next week, that could be a game where Atlanta, climbs their way back a little
Atlanta
bit.
has Las Vegas.
Well, okay, so that's probably a game where Atlanta's able to climb their way back. But then the Buccaneers have the Cowboys, Panthers, and Saints. In theory, those should all be wins. And if the Bucks win 3 of their next 4 games, that's going to be a season or a division title for them. So I don't think it's going to be too hard for them to clinch the division. They just can't let anything crazy happen. Can't let any injuries happen. If Mike Evans goes down, that becomes a different story because we saw how they played without Mike Evans earlier this season. But assuming things go to plan, they should be all right. Now, moving over to our next game, we have Seahawks at Cardinals. Seahawks 30-18 victory, pretty dominant divisional win on the road. Geno Smith, 24 of 30, 233 passing yards and a touchdown. Zach Charbonnet had himself a game. I said he'd do just fine without, Kenneth Walker, and he did do just fine. 22 carries, 134 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. JSN had 5 receptions for 82 receiving yards and a touchdown. That's Smith-Njigba's 5th straight game with at least 75 receiving yards. Kyler Murray got 2 touchdowns, also had 2 interceptions, so they kind of even out there. That was obviously a main factor in this game, his turnovers. If you lose by 12 points and you throw 2 interceptions, that's obviously going to be a massive difference. He has to limit those turnovers there. And I think Geno Smith obviously didn't have a turnover this game. He's consistently thrown interceptions this season. So for him not to have a turnover and for Kyler Murray to throw 2 interceptions, that's obviously a big reason why Arizona ended up losing this one. Trey McBride led Arizona in receiving, 7 receptions, 70 receiving yards. James Conner with 90 rushing yards and a touchdown. Seattle entered the half up 24-10 and never looked back from there. The Seahawks currently lead the division. However, their next 2 games are against the Packers and Vikings. They also play the Rams in Week 18, which could be a very crucial game in deciding who wins the NFC West, considering that the team they're most likely going to be competing with is the Rams. So stay tuned for that Week 18 game because it could be very, very, very important.
Is Arizona out of the division hunt with this loss, you think?
Yeah. I don't think it's official, but yes, they are.
Yeah, it's certainly not official, but they do fall to 6 and 7. I do want to bring up that their remaining schedule looks as such: Patriots, Panthers, Rams, 49ers. So I'm assuming that they can pull out both against the Patriots and Panthers. I mean, they might get a little bit of a run for their money in both of those, but then it's just going to be those crucial divisional matchups. I think, honestly, on purpose, the NFL usually tries for you to wrap up your schedule with a divisional opponent. And it seems like this year more than ever, as we come down to the wire here, it just looks like those are going to be the most important games. And, well, that's pretty fitting for the NFL to have divisional matchups as the ones to decide it all. But for Seattle, you pick up a huge win. We talked about how the Cardinals could really insert themselves back into that divisional race, get themselves tied for that number one spot where they win here, but instead they do the opposite. They're now 2 full games back. So again, we talked about what that means. They need 2 Seattle losses, 2 of their own wins to come back. But in this game, you're right. The turnovers were a big issue for the Cardinals. They throw 2 interceptions. Meanwhile, the Seahawks don't turn the ball over at all. And Geno Smith has another big game, but Zach Charbonnet was really the one to step up. 134 yards, 2 touchdowns in the absence of running back one, Kenneth Walker. And you mentioned how you thought he'd step up in his absence. I wasn't a firm believer because I did think that Geno Smith would rely more on that passing attack to try and get DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Jigba as those main targets, but really it wasn't so. Well, he does complete 24 passes, but for 233 yards, Smith and Jigba was a pretty big factor with 82 yards and a touchdown, but it really was the Seattle running game, which shows you a lot about how they can go multiple different ways. Now at 8-5, but on the other side of things, James Conner, not a terrible day. He picks up 90 yards. Marvin Harrison comes away empty-handed, no touchdowns, only 4 catches, 49 yards. And then James Conner also gets one in the receiving game. Trey McBride was their leading catcher with 7 for 70 yards. But this Arizona team, they're struggling recently. They lost this week against Seattle, obviously. They lose to the Vikings. They lose to the Seahawks 3 weeks ago. And then besides that, they did come in on a hot streak, but now they've lost 3 games in a row, 2 of them against divisional opponents. They fall below 500. Kyler Murray looks turnover prone. You're right, Matt. I do think this season is just about finished for Arizona.
Yeah, now moving over to the next game, we have 3 more games to go. This game was just lopsided, to say the least. Bears at 49ers. 49ers, they needed a win. Even if it doesn't mean they're going to make the playoffs, they needed a win. And they got one, 38-13. This game was never close. San Francisco jumped out to a 24-0 lead. Chicago obviously never climbed their way back. Caleb Williams didn't look terrible. 17 of 23, 134 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Rome Odunze had both of those touchdowns for Chicago. And then Brock Purdy had one of his best games of the season, 20 of 25, 325 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Isaac Guerendo, hopefully you learned how to say his name because the broadcaster said it a lot in this one. He had 15 carries for 78 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. George Kittle, 6 receptions, 151 receiving yards. And Juwan Jennings, 7 receptions, 90 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. The 49ers had 290 more yards in total than the Bears. And I don't know if you saw this graphic that popped up on the screen. But at one point in the game, the Bears had just 2 total yards, and San Francisco had 310. That is just mind-boggling, to say
2
the least.
total yards.
2 total yards to 310.
I didn't see it, but
Yeah, I
wow.
mean, that's insane. And it's extremely unlikely, but if San Francisco does win out, they'll finish the season at 10-7, I guess, with a shot to make the playoffs. Again, I doubt it, but this is a team that if they get in their groove, I wouldn't doubt their ability to maybe get a few more wins. I know you're shaking your head. I wouldn't say there's a good chance, but maybe even if they get 9-8, there's a possibility.
Matt, number 1, they're too banged up. And number 2, they've got the Rams, Dolphins, 49ers, and Cardinals to finish out their year.
Wait,
honestly,
the 49ers play the 49ers?
What?
The 49ers play the 49ers to end?
Did I say that? I said
Yeah,
they
you said
play the Cardinals. They play the Rams, the Dolphins, the Lions, and the Cardinals. No, they don't play themselves.
Yes, that makes more sense. But no, that's a tough 4 games.
Yeah, that is. So I mean, and they're so banged up, right? I mean, up and down. There's injuries all over the place. Trent Williams was out in this game. Obviously, you have that season-long injury to Ayuk. Both running backs are out. There's no way they finish anywhere. I mean, they're going to finish below 500, Matt.
Yeah,
As for
Phil.
this
Mhm.
game specifically, I think Caleb Williams, the completion percentage was high. The passes just weren't there. He was just playing comeback the entire game. When you start off at a 24-0 hole, unless you are the Chargers playing the Jaguars in the playoffs, you're not coming back from that. It's really tough to. So it when you have that bad of a start, I mean, what can you possibly expect? On the other side of things, when you jump out to that good of a start,
Mhm.
it's for a couple big reasons. Number one, your quarterback is playing efficiently, and Brock Purdy was in this game 20 of 25, 325 yards, 2 touchdowns. Number two, the running game can complement the passing game. It was in this game. Isaac Rendo, 15 carries, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. Number three, your playmakers are doing well with the ball in their hands. They were in this game. George Kittle, 6 receptions, 151 yards, 25. That's 25 average per catch. Jawan Jennings, absolute breakout year. He has had a couple huge games this season. And then everything else. I mean, when he is not filling in for Ayuk. Obviously, he's nowhere near this level of production, but he has taken that step forward to become probably the wide receiver two after Debo Samuel on the depth chart. But boy, he has looked like a true wide receiver two. His potential is really high right now. He has another great game with 2 touchdown catches and 90 yards and 7 receptions. I actually take that back. I wouldn't say his potential is really high. I'd say he's living up to his full potential right now. And
Mhm.
this sort of is something that was covered when that time when San Francisco had all those stars. When you're looking at a healthy team of CMC, Debo Samuel, Ayuk, George Kittle, it's kind of hard to get those, behind the scenes guys, Jawan Jennings, Kyle Juszczyk the ball as much. But now Jawan has stepped up in the absence of some of those star players. And it shows San Francisco shines bright. We talked about how we don't think they'll make the playoffs, but that's a very feel good win to put up 38 in front of your home crowd. We thought that Chicago would play really well, coming off of a couple unlucky games. They do not. They get embarrassed on the road and they fall all the way down to 4-9.
And I'm moving over to our next game. It was the highest scoring game of the week. Rams 44-42 victory over the Bills. Quite a surprising outcome, if you ask me. Not
Mm.
surprising in terms of the Rams couldn't beat the Bills. I think the Rams are a very solid team. But the fact that 44 points against Buffalo is kind of just insane, to be honest. Stafford found Nakua for a 19-yard touchdown with minute 54 left to play. That touchdown gave Los Angeles the lead, and the Bills failed to respond. I'd like to apologize. This is my formal apology to Josh Allen for saying that he's not my MVP. I take that all back. Um, yeah, without a doubt, my MVP at this point, 22 of 37, 342 passing yards, 82 rushing yards.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns. He was insane. All of his touchdowns went to different players. One of them being Khalil Shakir, 5 receptions, 106 receiving yards and a touchdown. And then Amari Cooper, 95 receiving yards, is the most single game receiving yards that he has had as a Bill. In terms of the Rams, who obviously won this game, Stafford had 320 passing yards and 2 touchdowns on good efficiency. And then Kyron Williams, 29 carries, 87 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. 29 carries is insane. That is a lot of carries. I don't know what his yards per carry was, but it's probably not great if you have 29 carries and had less than 100 rushing yards. And then Puka Nacua, a career game for him, possibly 12 receptions, 162 receiving yards, a receiving touchdown, and a rushing touchdown. Cooper Kupp, 5 receptions, 92 receiving yards, and a touchdown. There are a combined 902 yards in this game and 53 first downs. The Rams are 6-2 in their last 8 games, and this win makes them 7-6 on the year.
Yeah. I mean, Rams tossing up 44 against the Bills.
Yeah.
That is crazy. So they get the win. Let's just look at this from the Josh Allen perspective. I mean, it's so hard to stop that guy, whether it's with his legs, whether he's tossing darts down the field. His vision is immaculate. His ability to escape the pocket, Matt. I just don't think it's fair when you have a guy who's able to escape the pocket, but then run at a Derrick Henry level and find the end zone 3 times. Absolutely ridiculous. And then to score 6 touchdowns by one player and not win the game is probably even crazier in my mind. You're right. The teams combined for over 900 total yards. Absolute fireworks. I'm not sure if this is the highest scoring game in the league this year. I know there was that Saints Bucks game where I think they scored like 70 points combined, but this one certainly tops it. I'm trying to think back. I'm pretty sure that this one is the highest scoring game of the season so far. And if it was, boy, was it a good one. There was a lot to be fired up about from the Rams side of things. You talked about just how well Matt Stafford played. Puka Nakua, a career game all the way up to 162 yards. But the way I look at this from the Bill side of things, like this isn't a game that should really concern you. You played well. You played super well offensively. There's no reason that your defense should be letting up 44 points. And offensively, you did fine. You should win pretty much every game where you score 42 points. But the Rams offensively, could they be scary down the stretch? Was this sort of a one game sort of thing? Obviously, they do have stars in their receiving room. Kyron Williams rushes well in this game. Matthew Stafford, he has the ability to be a good quarterback, Matt. At 7-6, they're only one game behind Seattle. Does Los Angeles, are they good enough to seriously make a push for the playoffs and even win a playoff game?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're good enough to make a playoff push. It's going to be hard to get past the Seahawks, but considering the schedule, when you play that team on the last game of the season, again, you just got to be one game within them, and then that will determine it all. And yes, this was the highest scoring game of this season, which, as you mentioned, you did figure that was the case, and it was. But yeah, I think this is division still a toss up. Not obviously not between 4 teams, between 2 teams, the Seahawks and the Rams, and that's pretty much it. You can make the case about the Cardinals, but we kind of denied that one earlier in the
Debunked.
episode. Yeah, debunked that one earlier in the episode. But yeah, I definitely think that Los Angeles still has a chance. And if they don't make it, I think that they're one of the better teams in the NFL to not make it. A team
Mhm.
that can contend with anyone, to be honest. There are a few teams in my mind that can contend with anyone, even if they aren't necessarily the best team. I think the Rams fit into that category. I think maybe the Chargers fit into that category. But yeah, that was definitely it's kind of what I'm thinking when it comes to that team.
And they have the chance to come back out of this division. It's
Yeah.
not like, they don't hold it up to their fate. When you take a look at their schedule, 3 out of their remaining 4 games are divisional matchups. They play actually each team in their division. That's the Niners, Cardinals, and Seahawks once a piece, and then their other game is on the road in New Jersey to play against my New York Jets. So they have 3 games against divisional opponents, a very winnable game against the Jets. They could certainly make up ground, and they can make up ground fast. And also, all those divisional games gives them opportunities to break tiebreakers and stuff. So the Rams, I mean, they certainly have the outside chance at a full game back from Seattle, but I wouldn't necessarily say it would be shocking to see them overtake the Seahawks as
Mhm.
this one finishes off. Let's go to a team that is shocking. They somehow pull off magic week after week. They're 12-1. They feel like an 8-win team. They get a doinked in field goal to win the game. Who else is it, folks? With the football magicians on their side, it's the now 12-1 Kansas City Chiefs beating the 8-5 Chargers 19-17. Matt, I'll let you start off on this game with an absolute wild ending.
You said the football magicians on their side. Is that the refs?
Well, I mean, yeah, we go back to that
Yeah.
game against Atlanta, like week 4, where there was that obvious pass interference that the Chiefs would have lost the game. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, I kind of feel like this is a bit biased as, a non-Chiefs supporter. I'm sure they tell you otherwise that they make great calls. But why do I feel like whenever the Chiefs are playing, they do get calls to go their way? Like, I don't think it's scripted or anything, but I just think the Chiefs, the good teams sort of always get those close calls and even those not so close calls that are just blatantly missed. Matt, you are right.
Yeah, I mean it's probably just the refs being intimidated of Patrick Mahomes when it comes down to it. But no, I mean it's the same thing every week, and you can say, "Oh, the Chiefs aren't a good team. They have all these close wins," and I think I'd support anyone who makes that argument. But to be honest, a win is a win, and they continue to get them. So at some point, you have to say it doesn't matter how they're getting their wins. If they have their wins, it counts as a win, and they are a 12-1 team right now. But no, Kansas City entered the half up 13 to nothing. Los Angeles outscored the Chiefs 14 to nothing in the third quarter and took back the lead. However, Kansas City ended up hitting a game-winning field goal, as you mentioned. And then Justin Herbert in this one, 213 passing yards and a touchdown. Joshua Palmer got 78 of those yards. Patrick Mahomes, 210 passing yards and a touchdown. It's ridiculous. I mean, 10 of the Chiefs' 12 wins this season have come from one possession games. They've had 3 different kickers make game winning field goals. The most any other team has is one kicker who's made a game winning field goal. The Chiefs have 3 different kickers who have done it. I mean, it feels like the same exact story every single week. I'm sick of it. Whether it's gonna slide in the playoffs, what's gonna be interesting is in the playoffs. Are they gonna continue to do this thing where they struggle and somehow win games? Are they gonna struggle and get beat by better competition, or are they gonna step up in the playoffs like Patrick Mahomes always does? That I mean, I think those are the 3 different options, and honestly, I have no clue what to expect this season. It's just been a wild ride for Kansas City.
Yeah, mate, you touched on all the main points. My main takeaway is that these are two of the best potential. I'm using the word potential offenses in the NFL, and they really
Mhm.
don't put on like that great of a showing. I guess they combine for what I mean, almost 40
36.
points, but right,
Mhm.
but I mean, it's just not what you'd expect of Chiefs Chargers. You'd expect, a quarterback's duel. Honestly, if I had to pick a game that would end, what, 46-40 this week, it would probably be this one just because of the way that these two quarterbacks can play. Matt, I want to go back to what you said about, all these one score games. They've won 10 of their 12 games have been in one possession wins. Will it fly in the playoffs? Will it not? I'm kind of sitting here thinking, like, you're right. The narrative is the same every week. It's that they're always winning these close games. Matt, is it like luck? Like that the Chiefs come out on top of these close games? I feel like you cannot win 10 score football games with luck. Like you got to have good play. I get that you might say it's a little lucky that they doinked in the field goal, but you got to set up that with a drive to get all the way down to
Mhm.
that 20 something yard line to set that up. It's not like, they magically got placed there and they just barely snuck it in. It's not like they were playing bad, they were playing bad and Isaiah Likely just happened to land out of bounds in week one.
Mhm.
And it's not like they were playing, bad defense on that play and he was wide open. They were pressuring Lamar Jackson and he threw it and there was kind of tight coverage. So what can you say? I feel like, yes, it's a bit of luck with the Chiefs, but as lucky of a football team as they are, you got to respect some game out of that, right? Like you got to
Mhm.
understand that you don't win, you don't become a 12-1 NFL team
Yeah.
without having a good amount of skill. And I think we can both agree there that they have this skill. It's what they do with it in the playoffs that really matters. It's if Mahomes can take that Mahomes level playoff approach into it. If he can take that next step that we haven't seen out of the domination from him and his team in the regular season. But I just feel like how lucky they get in the regular season, they just grow to a new level in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, out of any year that the Chiefs have contended for a Super Bowl, this obviously feels like their weakest, despite being the best record in the NFL. This seems like their weakest case at the moment. But unfortunately, whether the rest of the NFL likes it or not, Matt, I think you agree with me that there's just a different feel, there's just a different vibe around what the Chiefs are like when it comes playoff time.
Yeah, I mean, you can say that they're not the best team in the NFL right now as an opinionated
Yeah, yeah, not
take,
record.
but they are
Mhm.
until someone gets a better record than them. And I know it's going to sound dumb saying this, but until someone gets a better record than them, I want to see the Chiefs play the Lions. That's what I want to see. And then I'll be able to tell you who the best team in the NFL is. But as you said, you're not going to win 12 games purely luck. To get in these situations, even getting in all these close game situations, if you weren't skilled, you'd be losing all these games. I mean, you can hate on the Chiefs all you want, and you have a solid reason to. But again, a win is a win, and no matter how it looks, they're getting a lot of them. Now, assuming that's all we have for this game, we have to move over to the weekly wrap, our new segment where we either ask a question or give a hot take at the end. I actually have two this week, if that's okay.
Yep, go ahead. I'm ready.
So the first one, obviously I mentioned how bad the Bears were. Was Matt Eberflus the problem? Is the Bears' offense completely broken or a mixture of both?
Well, Matt Eberflus was certainly a problem in that
Mhm.
Lions game. I don't think it's easy to coach a rookie quarterback, right? And
Yeah.
Caleb Williams, who's still developing. They have stars everywhere. So, yeah, and I also wouldn't blame it on the interim head coach to go into San Francisco. Obviously the scoreboard's not going to look great, but can you really expect that dude to, go in there on his first week of being an NFL coach and play some really good football? And we talked about how we thought it would ignite a spark in the locker room, and I mean, it clearly didn't in this game. But yes, I do think Matt Eberflus was a big problem for Chicago. That's just unacceptable. That's coaching 101. You can't miss that as an NFL level coach. That's something you have to be on top of, and he deserved to be fired. And I'm not going to sit here and act like the play calling before that and all, and before that debacle, before that blunder was great and all. They lost 19-3 to the Patriots a couple weeks
Mhm.
beforehand, right? And they've gotten embarrassed multiple times before. They lost 29-9 against the Cardinals. They played a bad game against the Commanders. Well, so did the Commanders in that game.
Yeah.
But it's not like the Bears were playing good football before that. They really, I mean, they weren't. They weren't playing great football. So yes, Matt Eberflus was certainly a problem, but it's also the problem of how much can you expect out of a rookie quarterback? I get Caleb Williams was the number one pick, but you still got to give him time to develop. I think the Chicago team has the potential to be really good in 2 years, maybe,
Mhm.
but for now, I do think Matt Eberflus was a problem.
Mhm.
And then what was the second part of that question, or was it the offense? I think the offense is a
Yeah.
bit of a problem, but not a concern. You get where I'm poking at. I'm
Yeah.
not saying, like they probably are. They are one of the reasons they're losing this game, but it's not like sound the alarms. Did we really expect the Bears to be like a 10-win team this year?
No, and I think I said this during the tailgate. It's been a lot of close game situations recently that just haven't gone their way. And then you put in a rookie quarterback, even if they do suck, it's a rookie quarterback. What do you expect? That's going to happen. It's just part of football. Now, I'll move over to my second question real quick. What do the Vikings do with their quarterback next season? Sam Darnold just went out there and had 5 touchdowns. They have JJ McCarthy. I'm assuming Daniel Jones is out of the equation because he obviously
I don't
won't be
know.
the
I don't
starter.
know. I don't know.
Who knows?
Put in
Maybe
Danny
they get
Dimes.
maybe they get a change in opinion. Maybe they want to try Daniel Jones for some reason. But do they go with the rookie or the not rookie, second year who hasn't played yet, or do they keep going with Darnold, who's been immaculate in his time playing this season?
Matt, this is an extremely obvious choice. You're talking about a quarterback who has not played an NFL snap yet, coming off of a seriously major
Mhm.
season-ending injury. And you're talking about a dude that just passed for 5 touchdowns and led his team to a 42-point win. They're 11-2, Matt. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it's not even that at this point. It's not if it ain't broke. If it ain't shining gold
Yeah.
metallic Mona Lisa art, don't throw tomatoes at it. I mean, the Vikings are 5 times better off than what you could have expected when JJ McCarthy went down with that injury. There is no way on planet Earth that I could see JJ McCarthy. I mean, barring some sort of, major, Sam Darnold gets injured or there's just this huge debacle. I don't know, I can't even come up with a hypothetical situation. I think there's no chance JJ McCarthy starts a game next year as long as Sam Darnold's healthy.
Nah, not even a game at all.
I mean, oh, come on, that's not fair to say. Like week
Well, yeah.
18, I don't think he will play meaningful football at all next
Uh,
year or at all the year after that, considering the way Sam Darnold's played. I mean, the dude has earned himself. He has completely turned his career around. I mean, they picked him up off the streets.
Yeah, now before we move over to our final weekly wrap, make sure you do call in. This is basically your last chance. Probably about going for maybe 5 more minutes. Call in if you have any questions. Make sure that you do get involved in the chat if you want to. Josh, now it's time for your question.
Yeah, and also if you can't call in, we would appreciate it if you sent in chats or anything. We will be responding to everything you guys drop down there. I want to take it to that NFC South. I get that the Buccaneers are sort of in prime position, right, at 7-6, a full game up in Atlanta, and I'm going to go ahead and say they win the division because obviously that's what it's looking like right here. Thanks, Timothy. I do really appreciate it. Thanks for your agreement. I'm going to go ahead and say they win their division here. Matt, I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to play absolute Buccaneers optimist. Everything goes right for Tampa Bay. The Bucs can be a tough out in the playoffs. I want you to talk to me about this.
I see it. I mean, that's a basic start, but I see it because this is a team. I mentioned those teams that can beat anyone. And those teams that I mentioned were the Chargers, the Rams, and I forgot the Buccaneers that are 1,000,000% another team in that category. The Lions 1 loss this season. Have they had 2 or is it 2 losses, I think?
Let me double check. Now I feel bad that I don't know how
I'm
many losses
completely
the
forgetting
Lions
their
have.
record.
Yeah, let me check real quick. Yeah, they are right now. I think they have 2.
Oh, yeah, so 2
They
losses. That
lost
was
to
it.
the Buccaneers
Mhm.
and no, they only have 1 loss. Sorry, my
Oh,
bad.
okay. Well, yeah, the point is that's their 1 loss. And the Buccaneers, they beat the Eagles by 17. And I mean, this is just a team that no matter who you put them against could win. And they could destroy them for that matter. They could destroy a lot of teams. It's all depending on healthiness for Tampa Bay. They were amazing with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They both went down. They sucked. Mike Evans comes back. Bucky Irving starts playing out of his mind. And they look like a championship contender again. And assuming they that's kind of the take you just made, though. I don't know about championship
Not
contender.
championship
But,
contender. I'm talking about tough out in the playoffs. I'm thinking like,
well, here's the thing.
yeah, you talk.
They're one of the teams that can actually give the Lions a run for their money.
Yeah, I agree. You talked about them, beating the Eagles. Obviously, that wasn't when they were at their prime point. And they stuck in there with the Chiefs and the Ravens, and they have picked up 3 straight wins, albeit against some of the worst teams in the league, the Giants, the Panthers, and the Raiders. But I really think when Baker Mayfield is locked in, Baker Mayfield's in his zone, especially if he can limit the interceptions. We know how good of a arm Baker Mayfield has. We know how good of a football player he can be. It's been the interceptions that's plagued him almost his entire career, since he was that number 1 draft pick all the way back in Cleveland, if you can remember way back when. Obviously, he's eliminated and become a well-rounded quarterback in Tampa Bay. And honestly, what I'm thinking right now, going back to that Sam Darnold take, is honestly, he's having a Baker Mayfield type career. Started off with that team for Darnold, it was the Jets, and couldn't really get anything going despite being a high draft pick with a whole lot of potential. He bounced around a couple places. They both took pit stops in Carolina. I think they both took pit stops in Los Angeles. Maybe Darnold didn't. They pinballed around a couple teams for league minimum, being the 3rd string quarterback, and they found their home, right? And for Tampa Bay, I think they're welcoming in Baker Mayfield, arms out, and to end the season, they have 3 pretty light wins: Cowboys, Panthers, Saints. So let's say they win those 3 games and then they do lose that 1 to the Chargers. That would finish them as a 10-win team, probably that, like, I'd say number 3 spot in that East, right behind the Eagles in the Lions. But yeah, I'm thinking that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could be a certainly a contender for the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, and we have another chat. Both of you are naturals at podcasting. John Keim knows who his replacement is going to be when he retires. That is an amazing compliment. I will tell you that. I had John Keim on my podcast. That is an amazing compliment. Obviously, love what Keim is doing for the Commanders. Who does the 4th seed play in the playoffs? The 7th seed?
No,
Or
that's the 1 seed gets a bye, the 2 seed plays the
mhm,
7 seed, the
11.
3 plays the
So
6,
5th.
4 plays the 5.
So right now they'd be playing the Vikings then, the Buccaneers. If it if the season ended right now,
Right,
they'd
because
be
the
playing the
Lions would be
Vikings.
division winners. And
Yeah,
so
and
the top 4 are reserved for division winners.
that'd be really tough. That would be extremely tough against the Vikings. But again, that's a team that I have no doubt that the Bucks could probably win 50% of their games against the Vikings if they played 100 times. I think they'd win probably 50 of those games. But no, I do think I don't know if they're necessarily going to make the Super Bowl. I don't even know about NFC Championship for that matter. But 1,000,000% a team that's going to put a scare in every other team that they play in the playoffs. So yeah, I do agree with you there.
They're kind of a culture that's built for the playoffs. I know that's kind of weird and
Mhm.
hard to wrap your head around, but I just feel like one of those, always playoff ready teams as opposed to a team like the Cardinals who have really choked away their division lead down the stretch here. Um, I'll give you a team on the AFC side of things. Um, I feel like the Steelers are always down the stretch playoff ready to hunt into their division. Maybe not playoff ready, but they play meaningful football down the stretch almost every year. They're always good when it comes down to the wire and making some noise and trying to insert themselves into the playoff picture. But yeah, I just feel like they're one of those teams that every team can struggle with. You want to do a little Monday night preview Bengals Cowboys before we do have to sign off?
It's not close. It's not close whatsoever. And I know we talked about this during our tailgate show. I'd be flabbergasted if the Bengals didn't win this game. I got to bring out the deep vocabulary for that one.
Flab.
Flabbergasted. Yeah, I mean, this one feels like something went wrong if Cincinnati doesn't win this game. I know the records don't say that they are favored, obviously. I believe the Cowboys are
Mhm.
one game ahead of them.
Yeah,
But
five
come on
and
now, we're
seven.
talking we're talking about a Cooper Rush-led Dallas team. I mean, CeeDee Lamb hasn't gotten involved basically the entire time that Cooper Rush has been their quarterback. And this is a Cincinnati team that's been really good this season. And I know you were talking about this on maybe last week's tailgate show. One of the unluckiest teams we've seen out of any team this season, if not all time.
Mhm.
They're a team, they're that same category of they can beat any team and they're not even going to make the playoffs.
They're not
They're
even gonna come close. They're
No,
4 and 8.
they're not even gonna come close to making the playoffs, and they're still a team that against the Chiefs, you don't know who's gonna win that game. So, yeah, I mean, I have Cincinnati in this one. Jamar Chase, expect what he's been doing. Hopefully, I'm in a win or go home, most likely playoff situation,
Ooh.
and, I'm down by 12, and I
Mhm.
have
Who do you have?
CeeDee Lamb and Rico Dowdle. Opponent
Oh,
has no one.
come on. They're
That
gonna
should be good.
combine for 12 points. Yeah,
But
you're
here's the
you're pretty
thing,
much good.
CeeDee Lamb has been getting, like, 5 points
He had a pretty
recently.
big game against Washington, did he not? I mean,
He'd
I
stop
think he
maybe,
had
like,
like
10 points in
7
that game.
receptions or something.
Yeah, but,
Um,
I
but
should
yeah,
be fine there.
as for my
Mm,
game picks, I also have the Bengals by a lot. If I had to say, probably around the 17-point mark. You're right, Matt. The Bengals offense is just way more lethal. They can do it in all facets of the game. Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase, Chase Brown in the running game,
mhm.
who stepped up. One Joe Mixon left for Houston and to play with the Texans. But I just think Cincinnati way overpowers Dallas in pretty much every facet of the game. I'm expecting a big game for Joe Burrow. Quote me on it, 375 passing, 2 touchdowns, and then another Chase Brown rushing touchdown. I'm expecting maybe a 27-point game here from Cincinnati, but that's all I've got for you.
Yeah, with that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanna say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
No, thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, absolutely, and for everyone who made it up to this point, I can't thank you enough for watching. Again, I'm Matthew Heiserman alongside Josh Wolver for your Week 14 Highlight Haven NFL recap show. As always, we will see you next time.